Welcome back, all you kings, queens, and in-betweens, to another Boruto 2 Blue Vortex review. Today we're going to be talking about 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 8. It just came out today, and I want to talk about it. We get a cover that's showing Jura, and we see him in his shredded outfit looking like a zombie from an old-time horror movie, and the title is It Doesn't Matter. This seems to primarily be referring to the conversation between Mitsuki and Ada. They reference the It Doesn't Matter or It Didn't Matter line a handful of times throughout their conversation, and that conversation is a focal point of the chapter itself because it really gets you into the head of Mitsuki and Ada, and these are two characters that are kind of at the emotional core of much of the story. But before we get to that conversation, we go back a little bit to the line of "I'm your son, it's that simple, come find me anytime," being witnessed by Ada. This is happening as she's using her ability to track down Boruto and Mitsuki at Kawaki's request. We do see that Delta's here as well, and she's going to be going with Kawaki to pursue Boruto and Mitsuki. Kawaki, of course, is being an ass to Ada, and that's just his character. I've never really been the biggest fan of Kawaki in general. I understand his role in the story, and I think it facilitates the plot to happen, but as a character, how he talks to people, that kind of edgy, snarky mentality that he has, where he kind of is mean to everybody around him, is the kind of personality that I don't like. So as much as I enjoy the story that's going on right now, I really don't like the secondary character, but honestly, that's not really that much different from Naruto and Sasuke. In the original series, I really didn't like Sasuke, how he talked to people, how he acted, that edgy kind of mean exterior that he had with everybody. I like him a lot better in Boruto, but that took an entire series to get him there. And I enjoyed the Naruto universe, the Naruto story, in spite of Sasuke, not because of Sasuke. It's good to see Delta involved again. I'd like to see what Delta's going to do going forward. I'm interested with the whole dynamic with Amado, and if we're going to get a interesting skew on her personality with this version of Delta versus the one that was acting on the benefit of the Kara organization, the version that was fighting for Kara and ended up fighting Naruto that one time. She's a little harsh to Kawaki, which is good because honestly he needs a little bit more pushback than he gets most of the time. The "once I'm done with my goals, I'll go away on my own" is an interesting way of Kawaki responding to Delta's aggression, because it does show that below all of the bluster and the negativity that he puts off and the things that he says to people, he has a goal that he's trying to achieve, and he holds that goal in higher regard than he holds himself, which is something we can dive more into, and I think will provide more depth to Kawaki and make him a more enjoyable character. We see the claw grime moving towards Konoha, which we realize is going to be the transportation method for Jura and Hidari to get to Konoha, while we see the conversation with Shikamaru and Boruto continue. Boruto basically info dumps on Shikamaru before they're interrupted by the call waiting system on Ino's call center mind, as she receives a call from Kawaki telling Shikamaru that he's on his way to meet Boruto, engage with him, and not let him get away. Of course, without saying it out loud, Shikamaru tips off Boruto, and that gives him the time to Flying Thunder got away. This seems like it leaves Kawaki suspicious that Boruto was able to leave before he was in sensing range of being able to find him. So I definitely think it's implied that Kawaki has some kind of suspicion towards Shikamaru. We then get to the conversation between Ada and Mitsuki, which takes up 8 pages of the manga and kind of functions as the core before we get to the whole Jura and Hidari arriving at Konoha thing. In this conversation, we get an insight into Mitsuki's thought process on how he's really feeling, which is a good follow-up to the conversation we got between Mitsuki and Boruto in the last manga chapter. He talks about how he feels with Kawaki and how Kawaki kind of is indifferent to him a lot of the times, and when Damon asks about that making him sad, he kind of says that it doesn't really matter to him, which is kind of our first inkling of that title coming into play. But it's not that it doesn't affect him, it's just that he's been feeling that way for quite some time, which is kind of sad. If you think about this from Mitsuki's perspective, he went from having his son be someone who genuinely cared about him as a person and was bringing out the good aspects of him, to overnight, not even overnight, instantaneously, his son was somebody who was cold and distant and didn't seem to care about him at all. But he still viewed him as the most important person in his life, and that wasn't even something that he controlled. So having to go through the time jump period of time, those years where the closest person to you, or the person you feel is the closest person to you, is so cold to you, it's gonna make you numb. It's kind of like an unrequited love feeling, and that's kind of how it's compared here, where he talks about how Ada and himself both feel love towards Kawaki and that they don't have control over it. In Mitsuki's case, he really doesn't have control over over it because he was just kind of forced into that by the use of omnipotence. And Ada just loves Kawaki because Kawaki is one of the Otsutsuki, so he's not affected by her charm technique, which makes him someone that she feels like she can make a genuine connection to. Mitsuki even talks about the fact that because of her technique, he experienced love for the first time, and without that, he didn't think that he would ever be able to experience this in its true form. Even though Ada makes him aware that this is a false feeling, Mitsuki doesn't really care because it still allowed him to experience that emotion and use it as a basis of comparison to his other feelings. So for someone who's an artificial person, as he calls himself, to be able to experience that emotion and interpret his other feelings in comparison to that, it opens up his emotional world to a whole new outlook that he might not have ever gotten the opportunity to understand. He was starting to understand what it was like to be friends, what it was like to have family, but where he was saying that someone was his son, what he was really saying without saying it and without understanding it is that someone is the person that you love. And now, having been exposed to that emotion of love through Ada's technique, he's able to understand that when someone is your son, that is the person who you love. And like the sun shines on the moon to give it light, that person that you love shines on you to bring out your true vibrance. And this whole story with Mitsuki is him discovering that he doesn't need someone else to make him shine. And Boruto, as his true son, as the true person that he loves, didn't continue to tell him that he needed someone else, but he told him that he was able to do it on his own and he needed to find that within himself. But for as long as he needed, that Boruto would be there for him and he just would have to come find him. It's those kind of emotional messages that run below these stories that on the surface look like just kids playing ninja. Mitsuki is a character that is a unique archetype to Boruto and the Naruto universe in general. We got a little bit of it with Sai in the Naruto series, but I never quite connected with Sai. I do see the parallels though, where it was a similar type of character. I just think that this story does a better job of using Mitsuki as the focal point of that kind of a story. I think unlike with Mitsuki in this story, in Naruto with Sai, there was too much other stuff going on and Sai wasn't able to be kind of a focal point of the story because he was the character that was tacked on to Team 7. He was the replacement Sasuke to a degree, and there was so much other stuff going on, going into all of the arcs having to do with the Akatsuki, that him not being one of the primary characters made his story suffer. In this, the story is at its core about Boruto and Kawaki, but just after that, the story is about Sarada and Mitsuki. So him being one of the primary characters allows it to get the breathing room in order to tell this story in a way that's effective. Through the conversation with Mitsuki, we also get some insight into Ada and kind of putting this in perspective that she's not necessarily a girl who loves Kawaki. She's, in her words, a foolish girl who's in love with being in love. And that stems to what I was talking about, where she's really in love with the concept that someone could be in love with her, which is why she finds herself drawn to Kawaki and partially drawn to Boruto. They're people that are not affected by her power, so they're people she can make a genuine connection with. And this conversation just seemed really real. I enjoyed getting the insight into Ada and Mitsuki, and I was glad that we got the follow-up right away rather than just jumping into the Jura plot, because I didn't think that this would hit as well as it did if we had too much lag time between the conversation between Boruto and Mitsuki and Ada and Mitsuki. Ada ends the conversation by thinking back to the last lines that Boruto said to Mitsuki, "I'm your son, it's that simple." She wants to have a long talk with Boruto because he seems to understand something that she doesn't, and maybe he can provide answers for her. Once we wrap that up, we get to Jura and Hidari, and Jura uses the cube that he's been sitting in front of for a while now when he was reading to transport through that claw grime that was approaching Konoha. And they're there. They are at the gates. Of course, with the ability to send chakra coming in and out of the village, Ino is made aware immediately and she alerts Shikamaru. And more importantly, that one of the chakra signatures belongs to Sasuke. She says that the other signature is unknown, which is a little weird if we are assuming that Jura is Jigen, because Jigen has entered Konoha before, back when he came out of the karma marking on Kawaki to abduct him. He didn't enter into the village the traditional way by crossing over the border, so it's possible that they weren't able to get his signature, which could explain this, but it just sent alarm bells ringing in my head that maybe this isn't Jigen like we've all been assuming, because we've never gotten actual confirmation for that. The two divine trees make it into the village with ease and make short work of the people guarding the gates, skewering them on divine tree spikes, and they make a little bit of a detour into a bookshop, and we've seen already that Jura has an affinity to books, so they go in and and that's only interrupted once Hidari bursts through the ceiling, having felt Kawaki. And the first fight ensues. We see that Kawaki's able to land a blow on Hidari, which he blocks, and then Kawaki is put up into one of the divine trees, which came pretty close to being able to absorb him. And there's a little mocking from Jura saying that they shouldn't do this here because they'll destroy the treasure trove of rare books. Kawaki's able to use Sukuna Hikoma to escape from the divine tree and continue the fight, where it doesn't seem like Kawaki has very much of a chance in this fight, and he is disposed of relatively easily, being sent flying back into a building. He's actually sent back into that water tower that I believe was the water tower that Sasuke and Naruto fought in front of, leading to it getting destroyed by Naruto. Jura does say that he pointedly is not killing Kawaki yet, so he's just kind of disposing of him for now. And then he seems to sense Naruto and starts moving. I had already had this spoiled ahead of time by all of the people making content like a week ago based on the spoilers, so I knew what was going on. But in this moment, most readers would have to be wondering, why is he sensing Naruto off in the distance when Kawaki's right there, and Kawaki is the one who has Naruto in that other dimension? But we get this answered for us as we cut to Team 10 and also showing Sarada and Sumire running towards the signature that is supposed to be Sasuke's. We see Jura stating that the reason why he's able to sense Naruto is because he's able to sense the Bijou chakra that's inside of him. And the reason he can do that is because he's an incarnation of a Bijou, meaning he's an incarnation of the Ten Tails, so he can sense the Kyuubi chakra inside of Naruto. And in that moment, it should also set off alarm bells because Kurama's not in Naruto anymore, so what Bijou is he sensing? And we immediately get our answer as he lands in front of Team 10 and focuses on Himawari. And all he has to say is, "This is odd. What in the world is going on here?" I appreciate that from a narrative standpoint, that Jura doesn't even know what's going on. I mean, we can make some assumptions here that Himawari has residual Kurama chakra in her because she's the child of a Jinchuriki, and that kind of opens the door to maybe Kurama can come back. Like, we assumed that Kurama would be able to be reincarnated, but the assumption there would be that it would be a while, so it would have removed Kurama from the story functionally. But with Kurama potentially being inside of Himawari, we could get not only a power increase for Himawari because the bond with Naruto and Kurama getting to watch Himawari grow up and develop, I'm sure he would have a connection with her, so she should immediately be able to go into some sort of a KCM2 state, which makes her hugely powerful. Though, if we assume that it's only a small fraction of Kurama's chakra, whatever was the residual in her, then it would probably be closer to whatever was inside of the Gold and Silver brothers. But still, that was hugely powerful. There can also be the assumption that this is almost like a new Kurama because it was born within her. This is all speculation, but it also can lead to another conclusion that can be drawn from Damon saying that Himawari was the worthy opponent. There was an assumption floating around that this was because of her parentage, but in a different way, not having to do with the fact that she could potentially be the inheritor of the Tenseigan, but that she is the current Nine-Tailed Jinchuriki. There's also potential for the fact that Kurama, since the chakra was destroyed and he would typically be reincarnated, maybe that chakra could have been reincarnated into her since a part of him was in there. And again, that would just lead us to a huge power increase for Himawari. I really wish all of the spoiler thumbnails and everything were not out there early, so I had this plot point revealed to me as it was intended to be revealed, but this was a really cool twist on what we assumed was going to happen. And overall, this chapter was amazing. I really liked the conversation between Ada and Mitsuki, and I liked seeing Jura and Hidari getting to enter the village, get into a little bit of a fight, and then immediately introduce us to an amazing plot point that we're going to have going forward, something to chew on between chapters. So please let me know your thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below. Like the video if you like it. Let me know if you're liking this Boruto coverage, if you want me to do more videos on Boruto outside of just the manga reviews, because I can start considering some deep dives and character examinations and talking about specific things here and there and theory crafting. So if that's something that you want to see, then please let me know. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of this content going forward, and ring that bell so you know what's up, and we'll catch you in the next one.